Wallabies squad named by Dave Rennie a couple of days ago. Now 35-man squad is out. We'll go through the squad pretty quickly, see who's in and who's out. We've got a few debutants in. Got a few experienced guys out, and you guys can let me know your thoughts on how these guys may or may not go against England. Hookers, Fainga'a, Lonergan, and Poriki. Fainga'a, I know, is leaving the Brumbies at the end of this season, but I'm not quite sure where he's going. I'm assuming the rumours are he's going to the Force. But yeah, if he was overseas based, he may find himself down in the pecking order. I'm not sure Dave Rennie has quite found himself who he wants as the starting number 2 for the Wallabies just yet, but Fainga'a is still in the race. Poriki is your debutant, although he's kind of in his late 20s, so he's a pretty experienced guy to be there. And Lonergan is kind of, your single digits, guy who's been capped by the Wallabies before, but still very much finding his way at international level. Props, they've named quite a few. Alaalatoa, Bell, Fa'amosili, Sio, Slipper, and Tupou. I think because Tupou is still nursing an injury, that's why they've named an extra. There's 6 guys there instead of what a lot of other squads have been naming with 5. Fa'amosili is been in the Wallabies squad before, but he's still yet to get a cap. I think his chances of getting a cap are more likely if Tupou is unavailable. If Tupou is there, I'm not sure how he goes. Sio's back in the mix after having a good tail end of the season with the Brumbies, although he's another one who's leaving the Brumbies, so kind of not sure where he's off to. I haven't seen that confirmed just yet, but otherwise relatively steady as she goes with the likes of Alaalatoa, Bell, Slipper, and co. Locks, there seems to be a little bit of change from what we've seen. It's another area where there's not been an out-and-out stability, like a hooper who's just all there every time, or a Tupou, or that kind of guy who's a bit of a like a stalwart who's just getting cap after cap. Frost, Neville, both of those guys are uncapped. Phillip and Swain are kind of like your specialist locks. I guess Matt Phillip is maybe the closest we've got to one of the regular second rowers for the Wallabies at the moment. Then you've got Holloway and Leota, who can probably both cover lock and Lucy. Maybe Holloway's being seen more of as a lock, but he will be getting his debut. Leota's got a few caps for the Wallabies, but I think he'll be more of a 6 if they play him. Hooper, Samu, Valtini, and Wilson. So good news for Harry Wilson to be back in after finding his way on the outer towards the end of the season. Hooper is captain, and he will be the mainstay at 7. Valtini has been nursing injuries at the end of the season, but he did just come back right in time. He's had a pretty cracking season. Likewise, Samu. So what jersey number these guys wear is still one to be decided. Like Valtini can cover basically 6 and 8. Samu, I think we've seen him 6, 7, and 8. Like I said, Leota can go into the second row or can cover 6 as well. Wilson, I think, has mostly been an 8, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see. In terms of forwards who we are missing, there's no guys from the Western Force entirely. Kaitu'u is maybe one of the main omissions at hooker, but as I said, it's been a bit of a revolving door with hooker, with no one really clamping down as being the leading guy. Every time you think someone is it, they either leave or get dropped for a while or whatever it is. Locks, remember previously we've seen him select a couple of the overseas locks, the guys like Will Skelton, Rory Arnold. Well, those guys aren't anywhere to be seen. They have picked a few overseas players in the backs, but none in the locks. Isaac Rodder has got a foot injury, so he is out for a few months, I believe. And Lukan Salakaia-Loto, ever since he took time off to go and be with his wife during the COVID lockdown times, he never really managed to get his way back into the squad. Now he's off to France. I would say his days in Wallaby Gold are probably done. But Fraser McCreight is another one. I believe Dave Rennie basically said he's kind of a like for like with Michael Hooper, so that if Hooper got injured, McCreight would probably be in. But with Hooper there, McCreight doesn't really seem to stand much of a chance. Liam Wright, I guess, from the Reds as well. He's not really had a lot of regular game time this season, so maybe he's kind of in a similar boat too. Into the backs, like I mentioned, there are a few overseas guys. The halfbacks, the scrum halves, are pretty much par for the course. Gordon, McDermott, and White. That's the same 3 we've seen from Dave Rennie for a wee while, so I can't see, there's nothing really much of a talking point there. It's pretty steady as she goes. Cooper, Lolesio, and O'Connor, your 10s. Cooper is one of the guys called back from Japan. It'll be interesting to see who Dave goes with as the leading 10. Like James O'Connor has had a pretty injury-disrupted season as well. Cooper looked phenomenal for the Wallabies last year, but wasn't available for all the games. Remember, his club basically advised him to come back and play for them rather than playing the full year with the Wallabies. And Lolesio, they kind of gave him a bit of a time off at the end of last year. Then when when Quade Cooper had to go back to Japan, they kind of called him back. So still a young man learning his trade, but has looked good for the Brumbies in recent weeks. So yeah, I would say, who do I say? O'Connor is the favourite. But yeah, Cooper was certainly the preferred option last year when O'Connor was out. And, Cooper had a couple of good games. The midfielders, Ikitau, Kerevi, and Paisami. Kerevi is another one of the guys called back from Japan. I think if you could pick one guy to pick from overseas, maybe Kerevi's the guy. Maybe Will Skelton, you could argue as well. But I seem to remember him being pretty quiet when he came off the bench with Wallabies last year. But every time I see him playing in France, he's been a proper unit. But yeah, Kerevi is certainly a good guy to have back. Ikitau will likely miss at least one game with his suspension because he got a red card a fortnight ago in Super Rugby. So that's kind of unfortunate. And then Paisami has been good when called upon as well. Then you got Pitaya and Parise, who could be outside backs, who could be midfielders. They've kind of been shuffling around a wee bit. If ever Kerevi isn't available, I would like to see Parise step into those shoes because I do back him as the kind of closest like-for-like big ball-carrying unit of a midfielder. So, yeah, we'll see where these guys get picked. Kellaway can also slot into the midfield, but I would say at Wallabies level, he's probably in the outside backs. Koroibete is the third of the guys picked from Japan, so he's back. Vunivalu is a guy, he's getting on the fast track a wee bit. I said the same for Roger Tuivasa-Sheck for the All Blacks. He's had a fair bit of the season off injured. He's showed a few glimmers of what he can do, but he hasn't really got to his full potential yet at union level. But I think maybe to try to keep him out of the clutches of the NRL clubs, they figure it's better to get him in the framework and see what he can do. He genuinely does offer something else from some of the other wingers with that league background and his ability in the air. So, yeah, good guy to have in there. Tom Wright and Tom Banks, your two Brumbies outside backs as well, kind of par for the course. The big name missing, I guess, is Reece Hodge. I think Dave Rennie basically said his start to the season was a bit lackluster. And, yeah, it's interesting because Tom Banks is going overseas, so I would have thought maybe that elevates Reece Hodge's stocks, but no, not to be. Banksy is still in. In the midfield, Simone is off overseas, so he's probably done. Foketi, I think, was in the squad last year, but he's certainly behind the guys in the picking order at the moment. Dalgunu has been in the squad, but he's been a bit inconsistent this year as well. So, yeah, it's a bit of a mixture. I mean, yeah, who else could they have had in the squad? There's been a few guys who've been called up but maybe not gotten caps before, but yeah, these are the guys they've gone with at the moment. It's it's a bit light of caps in some of the positions. I think Hooper is the one, like, genuinely, 100+ cap loose forward. But the other loose forwards are all, I mean, relatively inexperienced compared to some of the other guys around the blocks. There's a fair bit of inexperience in the locks with, if Holloway's a lock, 3 guys who are uncapped as well. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to see how these guys go up against England. But anyway, you guys let me know your thoughts. If you're picking a starting 15, who are you picking of this lot? Who's your starting 10? I think that's a good question. If you pick your starting 10, who is your 9 to go with that 10? Like, if you go with Lolesio, if you go with the youth, do you play him with Nick White to try to keep that Brumbies connection going on? Or do you go with McDermott and O'Connor, the Reds duo? But yeah, do you stick the 3 guys from Japan in straight away? Like, if you're going to pick the guys from Japan, do you pretty much have to play them? So does Cooper get the nod along with Koroibete and Kerevi? Anyway, you guys let me know your thoughts. How do you think these guys are going to go? And yes, I will talk to you guys again. So, see you later.